consent item number 13 and decision item number 2 that are not quite ready for prime time just yet. So with that, gentlemen, I would entertain.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 5-0. All right, presentations today. We have several presentations. First one comes from Western Piedmont Council of Governments, Innovation Transfer Update. I don't believe I've seen Anthony today. Anybody to speak on Anthony's behalf?
He'll be here at the regular meeting. He had a conflict with our meeting date.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll look for Anthony at our regular meeting. Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Presentation item number 2 comes from the Board of Commissioners, recognition of East Burke High School cheer team, and we'll be looking forward to seeing those young ladies at our regular meeting and recognizing them at that time. Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Item number 3 comes from the Valdez Economic Development Investment Corporation, annual update. This will be presented by representatives from VEDIC. Anybody here? There we are, yes.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. We will present the full presentation next week unless there's any questions at this time.
All right, any questions? All right, seeing here none, thank you very much. We'll look forward to your presentation at our regular meeting. Item number 4 presentations comes from the County Manager's Office, presentation on the Spring 2026 Citizens Academy. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm excited to ask the board to consider launching our Spring Citizens Academy. As you all are aware, we had a highly successful fall class with 18 completions. We've spent some time with those folks and surveyed, collected some data. We've put together a kind of a lessons learned committee with a few small recommended changes that we'd love to cover with you at your regular meeting, and then ultimately ask the Board of Commissioners to consider opening the application portal with the goal of starting our spring session in April. The changes that we'll propose at your regular meeting will be extending from 6 weeks to 7 weeks, and then a couple small modifications to the curriculum, but all that's based off feedback we got from our first class. So happy to answer any questions you all may have, but that will be our request.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manager. Any questions on this item? Seeing here none, without objection, this item will remain on the presentation agenda. This brings us to item 4, scheduled public hearings. We have 2 scheduled public hearings this month, both coming from Community Development, consideration of ordinance 2026-01, amending Chapter 10, Buildings and Building Regulations, the Burke County Code. And we'll hear from Alan Glines, our Planning Director. Good afternoon, Alan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Mr. Chairman, members of the public. Thank you. We have just a brief discussion tonight for you on both those items. There'll be 2 items that we're requesting public hearings on. So this item and the one to follow with Patrick on the lead on that one. But the interesting thing is they both come out of sort of standards and requirements of 160D. And if you're not familiar with that, that was a general statute that was adopted in the late 2021. And it was sort of a marriage of sorts of 2 different existing sections of state ordinance. It covered, it kind of brought together 153A, which managed for counties in North Carolina. It's like the rules of engagement and zoning and those sorts of things for counties, and also 160A for municipalities. So municipalities followed 160A. Over the years, the legislature tried to keep both chapters syncing together over time, and they finally decided to, with a big effort, is to just unite them into one big ordinance, one bigger ordinance. The goal wasn't to make The goal was to make processes clearer and consistent, and so we've been sort of working through our ordinances to sort of effectuate those changes and bring them into the Burke County Code as well. Chapter 7, and it's the thing we normally, where we bring before the board on a more usual basis, I would say, those are zoning amendments that we're trying to provide greater flexibility to property owners in Burke County. We're also trying to understand the standards that are in place for different developments, and in the right circumstances, make those more flexible for people, so reduce burden on them. And finally, providing additional options as we go forward. But Chapter 10, this is more of a modernization of the building and the building program in Burke County. Minimum housing is including in that. And I was looking over the dates of our existing Chapter 10 in the Burke County Code of Ordinances, and most of that ordinance dates from 1991. Using the 1991 state code, it was adopted in 1993. And later on, in 2000, some of our minimum housing, which deals with residential dwelling, that was adopted in 2000. So we're out of date with that ordinance, and so we'd like to kind of bring that along. Some of the language was similar, but there's so many changes. It was really hard to provide you with a red line, change by change section, because it was just so different. So it wasn't much to carry forward. So that's why you see mostly new text. But the new text follows Chapter 10, almost, chapter verse type thing. So it's real direct to that. As you know, the building code program is really about life and safety. And what we do here in Burke County is we follow the minimum of the state ordinance, the state building code. We're not beyond that. We're not, past more restrictive or more difficult for buildings. We're following the building code for North Carolina. So that's where we're at with all of our standards. So this Chapter 10, it's a new thing, but they specified the setting up of a building inspections department. We just thought we'd adopt all that. We do all that now, but we want to have it clear about everybody's duties and responsibilities, what we're supposed to do. So that's provided in that text for you all to review. There is an amended process for the building code enforcement. This is for unsafe structures, determining that, and then portions and components of what happens next. We have a few new options that are proposed, and it's clarified by the notice requirements in Chapter 10. There's a hearing with the chief building inspector or designee. Those designee folks are all professional staff in Burke County. That's who would be doing this work. They're qualified for the duty that they have to swear to and provide building code expertise on. So there's the notice, the hearing with the building inspector. There's always a way to appeal a staff decision. There's always that for any kind of staff decision for our kind of work. There's an appeal process. So we're trying to make sure that's specified in here. And we have an option here. It's a proposal, and it's recommended or provided as an option in Chapter 10 is to have a housing appeals board. And they would be I would think of them as the backstop to the building inspector's order. If someone has a disagreement with the order they've received, they can take that to a housing appeals board. Now, in our case, we're suggesting, if you're supportive of it, that this would be members of the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment is already in place for Burke County. We have that for all the other decisions and other things that boards of adjustment do. They're appointed by the Board of Commissioners, and they follow a quasi-judicial process already. They're used to that process. That's just kind of what they do. So an option here is to allow them to appeal. And that would happen after that building inspection hearing and order from the building inspector. Now, I'll tell you this, we don't have many of these cases over the years. It's really the most egregious ones that come before, that you all have ever seen in the past. We work with property owners to try to remediate their property, discuss options for them. The last thing we really want to do is ever have this kind of a hearing where it would have to come to the BOC or a housing appeals board or whatever. We try to give so many options for folks to bring their property into safety. Is really what it's about. So I do have Steve with me here somewhere today if you have questions for us, and we're happy to answer any clarifications or questions if some. Kenny couldn't be here tonight, Kenny Green, he had an appointment that was a long-standing appointment that he needed to make today, so he's apologetic of that, but he'll be here for the formal public hearing on the 16th.
All right, thank you, Alan. Any questions for Alan on this item? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, hey, Alan, thanks for all you guys do. Alan, what's our reputation or our perception out in the field with the contractors and the inspectors? I mean, have we got a good working relationship? I know you said we're doing that, but I mean, the contractors feel good about us when because I know a lot of times when getting, those things set and for people are not educated or don't know how the process works a lot of times, and they get frustrated, and then they blame you guys, and it's just all about safety. But is there a bridge there, or are you seeing a disconnect in any way in those kind of things?
I would, and Steve can speak to this as well, but I believe we have a good relationship with our contractors, and we're trying to always work on those relationships. It's a visit-by-visit relationship.
Yeah.
We go out and see their jobs and projects, and we're trying to do a good job of understanding where people are coming from, helping where we can, and giving direction if something's off course with a building or structure. But I believe overall we have a good relationship with the community.
And the state would allow us 48 hours after they notify us that they need an inspection, and we've been next day.
Excellent.
We're trying to keep up with that.
Yeah.
To keep projects moving and not delay on our part.
Right.
Weather delays, of course, no one can help that, but.
Just didn't have any homeowners throwing their hats down on the ground. Yeah, great. Thanks, Alan.
Other questions on this item? Yes.
I'm not sure I understood exactly what you were saying. You were saying that the counties and municipalities are going to align under the code or the ordinance, and that we have historically worked based on the state minimum. I don't think that, like, for example, the city of Morganton has always been on the minimum. I don't know that, but how is that going to affect us? And
Good question.
We enforce the state building code. We don't go beyond that, though. So there could be better ways of building in some cases. We'll accept those, we'll review them, inspect them. As long as they meet the minimum, we're okay with that.
Example, Commissioner, would be like, say you go look at a set of footings, and residential wouldn't require rebar. Well, the contractor puts rebar because he likes to hire, a building, and even though it's not required, he's met minimum and it's better, but we wouldn't require it.
And just as a point of clarity, I think historically there was a different statute for municipal building code versus county. And when one was updated, the other had to be updated, and it was just trying to bump both along. And back in 21, the General Assembly created one consolidated code during that codification of 160D. And our Chapter 10 particularly hasn't been updated since that point. So this is largely about becoming legally compliant.
One more thing, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry before we move on this. Thanks, Randy, that was a good point. One thing I want to make sure of is when it's this equal, I want the county to lead on a lot of things, moving forward on a lot of things. I know to set the standard in a lot of ways. I know, like on things we've dealt with before, a lot of times we kind of get a little piece after we've done a lot of the work kind of stuff, and I just want to make sure that, we're leading in these areas and we're not handicapping ourselves to municipalities or whatever. I want, as far as that goes, I want to include everybody, but I want the county to lead in a lot of ways and really favor the county in those regards. Anyway, I'll shut up.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Can I ask for one, if there's clarity, I know Alan did a really good job of explaining that most of the Chapter 10 rewrite is largely verbatim with the new 160D language to be modern and compliant. Also mirrors what was originally drafted, other than the things that have significantly changed in state code from what was adopted in 1993 from the 1991 code. The one dynamic change, and he mentioned it, was this creation of a housing appeals board for minimum housing process, and it does very clearly, much better than our previous code, lay out the process for what an inspector would do, that hearing and the process, so that I think that someone working through that would very clearly understand what the process is going to look like, which is good. But as it's written in this draft, at least, it is a transition from the Board of Commissioners currently, who are that board, to a more long-standing a quasi-judicial Board of Adjustment that meets monthly and all those things. And again, that's just a proposed draft. Neither are right or wrong across the state. It's done both ways. But if there's direction, Mr. Chairman, that the board is supportive or not supportive of that between now and your regular meeting, we could adjust that text so that we're good to move forward.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manager. Any discussion at this point? Everybody okay? I think we just recently have been through the process with the marshalees, and this would have been an instance where we would not have had to get so involved in that situation. We had a board that already met every month and was dealing with these kind of things. And they operate in that quasi-judicial fashion all the time, and they're accustomed to it, whereas it's something very odd for us to deal with. So any question on that?
Mr. Chairman, I think if I understand what I read correctly, vacant non-residential structures would still remain under our authority for appeals.
Or multifamily or commercial. Yes, sir.
This is really referring to residential that would go, and while I'm here, one other question. I see this says Housing Appeals Board, and you've made it clear that that would be the Board of Adjustment, but is it going to be named a separate board, or are we just using this for context? Would that really be two boards with the same people on it, or would it just be Board of Adjustment, and that's who the appeals
It would be one of their duties, and if they had an agenda item, it might be housing appeals section of their agenda, so it would be
We're not
the same.
creating a new board.
No, no.
Okay.
No, we don't want to do that.
That's how I took it, that there would be a roster, it might be the same people, but with terms, or it's Board of Adjustment, Housing Board, a Housing Appeal Board underneath. So some clarity on that would be helpful from my position.
So does the statute, Council, can you answer that? Does the statute allow the Board of Adjustment to act as this board, or?
So I believe I'd have to, it's a pretty long statute to go back to, but I don't believe there's anything prohibiting that or saying one way or the other we couldn't do it that way. But we can get clarity before the regular meeting and make sure how we're doing it.
One thing to consider is many of our boards that have been around for some time don't have original bylaws or original documents for their creation. And so, I think a way to handle that would be to identify how board leadership would be selected, what a quorum was, standard bylaws, and in those bylaws put that they would also accept this responsibility. Many of our existing advisory boards don't have those things, and we're working through, fixing that. And I think this would be a good opportunity maybe for the Board of Adjustment to redefine their purpose and all of that inside of that document.
If I can clarify one thing, I think Mr. Barry might have said, the Housing Appeals Board, I know it sounds like it's only dealing with residential. They could consider occupied commercial non-residential structures as well, if it was part of this.
Yeah, I think my concern could be that while we are who we are at this point, anytime I think because I think those kind of appeals are extremely serious and important to our citizens, and so I think having those hands-on with commissioners is pretty important too.
Okay.
Because we're going to be the one that they come to.
Yeah. Okay.
If there's an appeal, so it's just something for us to consider as we move forward as a board. What are our citizens going to think about it if there's an appeal, and so I'm just.
So we can make
Even if it's a little more work for us, maybe that's what they elected us for, I guess is.
Okay, so we would make it, if that was the case, we're moving in that direction to split those boards, that board, what they would review, we would make a small adjustment to this before your public hearing next time.
So the way the statute is written, is it requiring or allowing an appeal from that board to this board if the decision is something that the applicant doesn't like?
It's, I think it could be written where there's a stop at the Housing Appeals Board actions like demolition or other things could still be considered by the commissioners. I think it's flexible about who is hearing what and how far would it go. If you had an item like, we had the Marshallese situation, and if it went from the building inspector, which it did, and it was appealed, it could start at the Housing Appeals Board. You would have that knowledge as well, maybe when you were having to consider what's next. And each one of these steps, we're trying to give them more time. We're trying to work with the owner. We're trying to encourage them to bring it into compliance all the way through. So if it comes to you all, it should be, I think, last resort. You know, like they're ignoring us, or they're not hearing your board or your staff.
Okay, other questions or comments? Alan, the one thing that I had a little bit of difficulty as I reviewed this, and as you said, there may be a lot of difficulty with trying to do this in a red line format. As I was looking through this, I pulled up the other ordinance, or the existing ordinance, and it was a little bit difficult because some of these items, I don't know that 1026 happens to be one of them, but the new 1026, if per se, is completely different from what was there. And I guess my question is, what happened to what was there? If it was adequate or it needed to be somewhere, did we put it somewhere else, or it just didn't need to be there at all?
1026.
And I don't know that 1026 is even one of those areas, but as I went through, I noted several that the new text didn't even resemble, what the old text was.
That's right.
It was almost a different topic.
Yeah, they didn't cover things like setting up a building inspections department, responsibilities of the building inspectors, qualifications included. None of that's in the original ordinance. I think I wanted to bring all that in because it's part of 160D, and it's helpful. It's setting up how the process works, how permits are issued, allowing modern permit methods and certain options that weren't available certainly in 1993. Computer programs and online permitting and that sort of stuff. So we were trying to bring all that into it. It just doesn't. There was no place for it in the old ordinance.
I don't know if it's possible, if you could, maybe put together a side sheet or something that shows the context of section by section, what happened to it, or did it not need to exist in this chapter or in this section?
Okay.
Would be helpful to me.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, the code codifiers will need a red line copy eventually. So I need it.
Any other question, comment? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate the presentation on this item. This will move on to item 2. I think I heard some explanation already about item 2, but Alan, we'll let you or Patrick carry on with item 2.
Good afternoon, y'all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is our next edition of our updates to our zoning ordinance. Back in March of 25, y'all had kind of charged the Community Development Department to really look through our zoning ordinance and try and reduce burden on our citizens and developers. And so I think this slide can kind of help y'all understand where we are in the timeline here. This kind of lays out everything that we've done, where we're heading, what we're doing. So right here, we are introducing ZTA 2025-02. This is I would consider it still pretty minor. We are really just hitting on some of the big, hard-hitting topics that our citizens have been asking us for. The biggest one is reducing our regulation on accessory buildings. That has been one of our biggest burdens on the Board of Adjustment. They were seeing on average about 3 cases a month. Basically, that told us that our limits were not where they needed to be. So that kind of spearheaded this kind of text change, and we wanted to make sure we adjusted that. And so while we were in there, we did some other things. I can give y'all the full presentation. Do y'all want that today, or do you want me to kind of just give you the highlights and let y'all talk about it later? Just anyone? It just highlights, okay. So a few of the things that we have added into this and we've adjusted. The first thing, like I mentioned, was we've reduced that accessory structure burden. We believe that this will alleviate a lot of the cases that the BOA was seeing. Obviously, we had a lot of situations where property owners were coming in and they were right there on I have 3 acres and 1,500 square feet. We've expanded that where we really think that a lot of these cases, actually, on one of my slides, I do have 3 cases that would have not gone to the Board of Adjustment if we would have updated to what we have for the new standards. Our second thing is we've added a new definition for tiny homes. I don't know if y'all are up to date on the housing fads, but that is a growing fad across the country. So basically we are now acknowledging that they exist in our zoning ordinance and accepting that as a housing type that we want to see built here in Burke County. Our next thing is we are getting into compliance with solar farms. NCDEQ now has decommissioning requirements. Basically, that means that DEQ takes care of all of the who's going to take care of it when it's done kind of thing. Basically, this requires the landowner or the folks that are putting the solar farms to have financing and a plan in place for when this is done. We are now codifying that into our zoning ordinance and making sure that that is explicitly listed in there. Our next thing, we have clarified that ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units, these are your mom and pop flats, your son came back from college and can't afford rent, those kinds of places. We've clarified that now they can be 100 or 1,000 square feet heated, so you can have your porches and your decks, and that doesn't count towards your square footage. We've also simplified and removed some of our redundant information in our mobile home parks section. A lot of the language that was in there was very confusing because we covered it in other part of the ordinance. So basically we now are referring it to existing parts of the ordinance, which moves us towards a UDO. I'm not sure if y'all know what that is. That's a Unified Development Ordinance. And basically that works as one kind of Bible of land use. So you can look at that one-stop shop and get everything you need to know. So we're kind of moving towards that, and a part of that was adjusting our mobile home standards and making sure that they weren't too overburdening for existing parks and improvements for those. And then finally, we also have improved some of the options for our special developments. These are types of developments that we would see every once in a while in Burke. The biggest one that would be a change is the community master plan. This would be a conditional zoning. I'm not sure how many of y'all were on the mega site conditional zoning at the time, but basically what this would allow you to do is the developer comes in, has a site plan, they can ask for a community master plan, and what this would allow us to do is it automatically triggers a site plan review with our site team, that's emergency management, fire marshal's office, all of us in zoning. Then the planning board would see it, and then you guys would see it, and each part of that process would have a public hearing as well. This kind of allows developers to do mixed-use campuses like the Morganton Innovation Campus, things like that we're starting to see a lot more light manufacturing, residential, office spaces on one parcel. Traditional zoning does not really work with that. We like things separated in zoning. This kind of works together, and it would be a community master plan. That means it would be regulated by that master plan that you all would approve in that situation. And then finally, another kind of smaller adjustment that we're happy to do is we're transitioning to digital site plans from paper site plans. So now we are not requiring 7 pieces of paper for a site plan from our developers, which should speed up that process and allow us to collaborate a little bit better. If y'all have any questions about what you see in the Exhibit A or any of the information, please let me know, and I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all have now.
Gentlemen, any questions on this item? Madam Clerk, I think the problem that I had reviewing this is I don't think we have it. We have ordinance 2026-01 copied, placed again, and I just don't think we had the presentation in the.
Yeah, I was noticing that the file that I have named the exhibit with the information is the file name, but it's not the document that we worked on and prepared.
I was going to grab hard copies for everybody.
Okay, so
We
gentlemen,
have it, we can throw it up on the screen.
Well, I think Patrick, kind of hit the highlights of it, gentlemen, you want to, I tell you what, Patrick, why don't you just add ease a minute, and while Emma is getting that information, maybe we can take just a little closer look at it. Then we'll come back to this item just in a minute. Everybody okay with that? I'd like, before we leave today, if we've got any particular issues we need to discuss before our meeting, we'll have an opportunity to do that. So Patrick, let's just hold where we are for just a minute.
Sounds good.
And we'll let Emma hopefully get a chance to get us some copies and give us just a few minutes to take a look at it. And we'll have a little bit more information. So let's move on at this time to the consent agenda. Thank you. First item on the consent agenda is Burke County Public Schools presentation of financial data for the period ending December 31, 2025. Mr. Lawson, afternoon.
Good afternoon, county officials. I appreciate the opportunity to stand before you today and present Burke County Public Schools mid-year financial results. The forms and the presentation format, of course, you'll all recognize and are very familiar with. The first two columns represent our previous year's funding sources, or funds by source, state, federal, local, and our special revenue funds. The next two columns, the December year-to-date, are our actual results. As you can see, state funds, our spending is down mid-year 1.8%. I'll jump back to state in a little while and make just a few points. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I'll certainly be happy at any point to entertain any questions or satisfy any curiosities you may have. Federal funds were down 7.8%. That may seem pretty extreme, but we are back to pre-pandemic spending levels with federal funds. Next, we have local and charter schools, which are the funds provided by you all. The local line item, of course, up 1.1%, which represents your increased funding to the schools. We appreciate that very much. The charter schools are the funds that we're the pass-through agent. You all fund us, and then we give the charters their per pupil portion of those funds. Next, we have fines and forfeitures. You can see it's down significantly mid-year. I guess for societal reasons, that's a good thing. Financially speaking, I hope it rebounds and is back up. So that's sort of a conflicting line item for me. Next, we have receivables, which that is just simply funds due from the schools and their own school funds that they owe the central office. And then we have special revenue funds down 12.1%. Special revenue funds consist of federal, state, and local grants, which are not managed or given to us through the Department of Public Instruction. Also consist of Medicaid funds as well as our pre-K programs. Yes, sir.
I remember a day or a time when special revenue funds they were on the block to be shared with charters, and did that ever go anywhere?
It has not, and I guess with the recent events with COVID and things of that matter, that sort of fell by the wayside. Hasn't had much traction of late. I haven't heard that it's any consideration, but you are correct. Charters there for several years were pretty relentless in pursuing those funds. And for instance, one example I'll give to you of the reason that we as public schools fight that approach and their belief or ideal that they should receive a per student portion of that pre-K tuition. We have pre-K programs. Parents pay for their children to attend our pre-K programs. So why should a parent pay to have their child come to pre-K in Burke County Public Schools and we give a portion of their tuition to a charter school? And that's just one of many examples I could cite.
There was also an issue with some of the virtual charter schools. I think there was some that were actually managed out of Florida. Are we having to share special revenue funds with them?
No.
Okay.
They do receive their per pupil local allocation as well as their state allocations. What I will say that's a little perplexing to me about virtual charter schools, I think we've all learned, at least in the K-12 environment during COVID, virtual learning wasn't very successful. Thus, we had a lot of learning loss programs, a lot of ESSER funds put forward to address learning loss. Yet the cap on virtual charter schools was lifted from $790 per student cap to they receive their per pupil local allotment just as a brick and mortar charter does. As far as state funds, did I answer your question sufficiently?
I was just curious if any of that had ever gotten addressed.
As far as state funding, you all know we don't have a state budget this year, so you might expect to see that December year-to-date flat. Well, for us, we have a declining enrollment. We lost 93 students. And then also, we had a reduction in low wealth state funding of $1.4 million. To further compound the issue, employer matching retirement increased by 3%. Health insurance premiums increased by 5%, so we were forced to absorb all of that without any increase in funding. The difficulty, and you'll see that we're down overall 2.5%, down 1.8% in the state. I feel we very sufficiently and effectively have addressed the deficit issue for this year, have a solid plan, and are working diligently to address next year's projected deficit. But the difficulty in adjusting is we're 86% payroll, and of that, the majority is teacher salaries. Well, we don't lose kids by whole classrooms. We lose kids throughout buildings, throughout grade levels. For instance, we're funded 1 to 19 based on the state formula, one teacher for 19 first graders. All right, we have 14 elementary schools. If we have 24 kids at elementary school A, okay, we've received funding 1 for 19 kids. The only way that works if you have all your first grade in one building. Then you can do the division and things work for you. But when you have them in 14 schools and you lose 1 here, 2 there, all across the district, what happens is we have a class at elementary A, we have 24 first graders. So we're over the 19, so we have to split that. We have 2 classes of 12. Again, we're funded 1 to 19, so we got 7 kids in this class, their teacher's not funded. 7 kids in this class, the teacher's not funded. We have 2 whole teachers, but in theory, we're funded for 1 1/4. Another issue that's impacting us, and we see this to continue for at least the near future, and I'll quote some stats from the CDC. National birth rate in 2024 was 1.5999, below the replacement level needed of 2.1 in order to hold our population steady. That's nationally. So we're 23.8% below the birth rate needed to replenish our population. What that translates to locally, this year we have 699 kindergartners. We have 923 seniors in high school. So we lose 923 and we gain 699, that's a difference of 224. That significantly, very significantly impacts our funding. And that's not just public schools, charter schools as well. The state average was almost $4,500 decline, or 4,500 student decline in enrollment for the state. That translates also to charter schools. For instance, locally, Last year, we paid for 576 students in charters. This year, it's 561. So they're also down. In slide 2, an illustration of local spending, and you can see that's broken out by regular instructional support, other government units, and revenues over and under. Revenues over and under is the critical line that I want to point to, and that's a good barometer for our financial position overall. As you can see, that line in the total column is $129,968. That is midway through the year. We have contributed $130,000 to fund balance. Now, that's not to say we're going to end the year contributing, because I know we're not. We have our low wealth funding in the state that I know we're short on. We're going to rely on local to help offset some of that. But at this point last year, we were $300,000 into fund balance. So that's a $400,000+ flip in position. So that makes me feel confident and comfortable in that we've made the right reductions, appropriate reductions, and sufficient reductions to meet this year's deficit. And now we're thinking about and concentrating on next. So that's
Thank
it.
you, Keith. Any questions for Keith on this
So
item?
Keith, are you still dealing with reversions? Is that a thing on the ADM count days, or?
No, haven't seen reversions, haven't heard those spoken of. You know, we certainly anticipate, based on this, we know we're going to receive next year another reduction in state funds due to declining enrollment. And then we were advised by the Office of State Budget Management on January the 8th to forecast a 2.5% reduction in state revenues. We were already using 2.4, so that wasn't a significant impact. So we're preparing for that going forward.
So what do you think is the main driver of the reduction in low wealth funding?
I don't know. Mr. Epley could probably address that better than I, but it's a very complex formula, but it basically comes down to effective tax rates by county, and then the levies based on every county, and each county is dependent on what the other one does. So it's so unpredictable. One year we get it, and one year we don't. It's very unpredictable.
Other questions, comments? Keith, you've really brought us up on a positive note here.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your report today. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Item number 2, Western Piedmont Community College, presentation of financial data for the period ending December 31, 2025. This will be presented by Sandy Holman. Afternoon, Sandy.
Afternoon. Thank you for having me today. We'll go over the midpoint for Western Piedmont Community College. First 3 columns you see there are our state funds, and as Mr. Lawson mentioned, we do not have a state budget for this fiscal year. However, there was an independent bill that did allow for our allocation of enrollment growth. So our current state budget is $17,888,820, which includes formula allocations and other allocations that have came in throughout the year, which you can see on the lower left-hand side. Currently, there's not been any salary increases since there was not a state budget. But we are making it through. We are very excited that we did get the enrollment growth that handled the FTE increase that we had from last year. So through December 31st, we've spent $8,229,081, or 46% of our state budget, which is in line with our normal processes. The next 3 columns is our county budget and actual expenditures through December 31st. We've spent $1,656,600 through the second quarter, utilizing 53% of our budget. This is slightly higher than normal or previous years. We had some issues at the beginning of the fall semester that had to be taken care of, which counted for that overage. But we do have a very strong fund balance as well, so we see no issues coming from that. And then the final 3 columns is our institutional funds, which includes everything except for state and county funds. And our budget is $10,968,444 in those funds. And again, that can include local, state, federal grants that may come through, or bookstore funds, Student Government Association, and other funds of that nature. So our total combined college budget so far through the midpoint is $31,979,528, and we are at approximately 44%. So we see no issues with our budget or expenditures so far this year. The next slide that you have in your package will be the expenditure categories for county funds. Major expenditure categories as normal are salaries and benefits at 26.3%, contracted services at 17.8%, utilities at 19.8%, and repairs and maintenance at 13.4%. Those are our four primary expenditure categories that county funds help to take care of. Any questions on those before I move into some other data points?
Just one real quick question.
Sure.
Have you guys has your enrollment increase been funded yet?
Increased.
Or do you have your enrollment increase from last year?
We do, and I'm actually going to mention that next.
Okay.
Okay. So I did want to mention that this year we also moved to 8-week semesters along with our 16 weeks, but we have an A term and a B term. We took about 70% of our courses to 8 weeks. A lot of data across the nation shows that some of this can improve student success because that gives them students opportunities. If they take 4 over a 16-week term and something happens, flat tire, medical expenses, they may have to drop all 4. Whereas if you break that up and you do 2 in the first 8 weeks and 2 in the second, if something happens, a student may not fall behind as quickly. So we did do that, and for our enrollment for fall semester, our FTE was 778, which was an increase of 4.9%. The flip side of that, something that we have not experienced probably very much, maybe only 1 or 2 times in my 20 years, is that our head count actually decreased. We have seen that with other colleges that went to an 8-week program, is that they would see that bump in FTE and maybe a decrease or flat in the head count. So it is something that we're definitely watching. We feel that it's only going to be a 1-year spike. So while we feel like FTE really jumped this year, we had an increase last year and it jumped this year. We are watching that closely because that may just be that one-time jump. But we are concerned with that. For spring semester, as of January 6th, there was still time for some drops, so this may not be as accurate, but as of January 6th, right before the semester started, our FTE increased 9% for the spring semester. And again, enrollment decreased by 1.9%. So again, watching that very closely as we move into next year. We're also watching very closely how this weather is impacting our 8-week terms as well, because obviously, as Mr. Lawson said, remote instruction is not always the most successful for students, and we were out all of last week and Monday on a remote learning for students. And then, of course, your hands-on classes cannot do remote, such as welding, cosmetology, nursing to a certain extent. So we're going to watch that very closely as well. But the good news is our FTE is up, and that's the positive there. So I'll stop on that positive note before I finalize my comments. Any questions on that? Okay. The last thing I wanted to mention is later in your meeting, you're going to see a budget amendment. We have been working our budget with the county on a 5-year capital plan to put some money back for capital improvement projects. And so we have come and requested that we transfer $650,000 from reserve to the budget so that we can utilize that for some capital projects. And I just wanted to mention some of those capital projects that we have going on right now. So electrical panel replacements, we had Federal Pacific electrical panels in several of our buildings. Our insurance company told us we can no longer have that. It used to be more of a residential issue, and they had known that we had these panels, but in one of our last inspections 2 years ago, they said we did have to change them now. Unfortunately, we have them in 9 buildings. So we have been working on that. The bids came in, our original budget was $750,000 for that. And so we are about 75% complete with that now. We did go after grant funding to help with some of this, which has, we got $400,000 from the Cannon Foundation. So that has definitely helped a lot. But as we finish this, we're going to need some of that county capital. Also, the Alpine Tower and Ropes course, we've had to rebuild it because of Hurricane Helene. We have finally gotten bids for that. That's gonna be around $325,000. Again, we're waiting for final confirmation from our insurance company and also FEMA to see if we get any funds from that to help. We know that we're gonna get some from the insurance, but it's not gonna be much, maybe around that 40 to 50% mark of what the actual replacement cost is. Still working with FEMA to see if we can get any funds there. But that would be a project for this year that we hope to be completed by the fall semester. And then we had to replace the chiller for our Pfeiffer Hall, which is where our library, cafe, bookstore, and several classrooms are. That was one of those things that happened at the beginning of the fall semester where we had quite a few issues, and that unit had to be replaced. Our original budget was $175,000 for that. It did come in a little less than budget, but while there may be some change orders, we still expect it to be under the 175 by a small amount. And then we do have renovations at FHEC that we're working on now. We've just started this project. We're implementing dental hygiene. We've always had dental assisting, which was a diploma program. Dental hygiene is a 2-year curriculum program, and we needed additional lab space for the clinical part of that program. So we'll be taking another classroom and building a dental lab, so it'll have more of the dental chairs in that classroom. So that's going to be a capital project because it's going to take a lot of plumbing to those chairs and electrical. So that's the projects that we're currently working on that we'll be utilizing these funds for. And as we've done in the past, what we do normally is once we get the invoice and we pay that invoice, then we ask the county for reimbursement. So it would remain with the county until we pay those invoices, and then we'll ask for reimbursement. Any questions on any of those projects?
Yes, I've got a question, Sandy. Do we ever incorporate in the trade school and stuff like that in these capital projects where they come alongside the contractors that are doing their in the field stuff or hands-on real stuff? I know that's probably an off the wall question, but
Not off the wall at all. And actually the answer is yes and no. So sometimes there can be possibilities for some of our students to be either an intern or do some work-based learning for the projects. Normally, they don't do the projects from beginning to end. Sometimes that's due to timing. Certainly, some of the projects we have to have inspected and permitted by, a general contractor. And just the fact that they are students. But we do try to use them when we can, especially for work-based learning or interns, because we actually do have an intern right now that's working for Vinoy Construction that's doing our emergency service training center. So we do try to get them some field experience, but very rarely can they do an entire project. Our welding students have done some stuff, like if we've had a railing come loose or something like that, something small like that, we have had a welding class do. So the answer is kind of yes and no, depending on the situation.
okay, thank you.
I would imagine the Umstead Act kind of comes into play on some of that, doesn't it?
It really does, and for those that may not be as familiar with that, the Umstead Act does not want community colleges, really governmental or nonprofit, to take out businesses in the community. So while we can do some of that work, we can't really make a profit off of that, if that makes sense. It's got to be for instructional purposes, and it's like our cosmetology school. With that cosmetology center, our students have to see patrons, because that's part of their instruction, learning how to work with patrons, how to market their own skills, and how to do the business side of cosmetology. But at the same time, we can't really sell and make a profit off of a lot of the supplies or the services that we offer, because it is for instructional purposes. So we only really open 2 days a week for cosmetology to really stay within that Umstead Act.
I got you. That helps me a lot. Randy helps me on stuff like that, because y'all know me. I'm trying let's get all the kids, everybody, let's all build it together, kind of like the Amish did. Hey, we got a barn raising or whatever, But yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Other questions, comments? All right, thank you, Sandy. Without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 3 comes from TDA, financial update for the period ending December 31, 2025. This will be presented by Ed Phillips, our CEO, Tourism Development Authority. Afternoon, Ed.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I want to mention something about Western Piedmont Community College very quickly. I was in a meeting over there yesterday. Part of our America 250 program, we're going to have a time capsule to be constructed, filled up with stuff, and sealed on July 4th-ish. And Western Piedmont is going to be our contractor. They're going to build it for us with faculty and students, and hopefully stainless steel and some really cool local wood, and put that together. So important there. Western Piedmont's such a great part of our community.
Yeah,
So-
I just have one question about that. We're not gonna bury it under the horse,
No,
are we?
no. This is, you may get into that, I'll tell you real quickly, we're not gonna bury this one. We have received permission to display it at the Register of Deeds office in their lobby for the next 50 years, where hundreds of thousands of people will see it over 50 years. And we won't have to worry about moisture in the ground or any of those problems that have been associated with time capsules. So, but I'll tell you a little bit about that here in a second. But I did want to get into the financials of the TDA. As of December 31st, we had combined assets of a little over $1 million in our capital management account, and also First Citizens Bank, our active checking account there. Occupancy taxes are running ahead of last year, fiscal year, slightly. Of course, we had the Helene and recovery workers here that started October, November, December, January, that tailed off in March. So we're not going to meet those numbers that we had last year for that, but we're still in a very positive growth, and looking back even to 2023, we're still on an upward mobile climb. Some of that from 2023 to 2025 is also the average daily rate has gone up at hotels. So if you have a 5% increase in average daily rate, that equals a 5% increase in occupancy tax. But we are above that as well. So occupancy, average daily rate combined is still showing solid hotel business here. We are going to be doing a vacation rental inventory sometime in June, when we think most of our county vacation rentals will be up and listed and running and more easily counted. We know there's over 200. Some estimates we've seen are closer to 300. It's going to fall in there somewhere, but they have increased in the last few years, so we know that's going to be up. Also, I want us to tell you about visitors. So in 2025, we were up 19% over 2024 in visitors in the visitor center. Since 2023, we're up 51%. Last year, in 2025, we had visitors from 42 out of 50 states, 15 countries, primarily from Europe, Asia, and a couple from Australia. None from South America or Africa continent. So that interesting stats, just for what it's worth out there. Our other financials, like our budget on the next line, are in line. We don't have any surprises or anything there. We maintain a pretty conservative budget, making sure that we have funds to do our marketing and maintain our efforts to promote Burke County in a responsible way. America 250, real quick. Like I said, time capsule. We also just put in an application to plant a Liberty tree here. That's going to go at Freedom Park. The city of Morganton will take that and manage that project. We have a local shrub nursery that has donated the tree. And then we're also going to be meeting for a 4th of July event, yet to be determined exactly what that is. So put that back on our calendar and talk about that. So any questions?
Questions for you? Is a Liberty tree a real species?
It is, well, it's our own choice of what the species is. And
American chestnut?
well, no, we got a lot of those here that have been planted, but it's been recommended a fire maple. So a really pretty fire maple that'll bloom and be recognizable over the years as our Liberty tree.
Okay. Ed, what would maybe our top 3 or 5 marketing advertising expenses be?
So we have a couple of things we do. Our state magazine in the fall mountain issue, which comes out in October. Actually,
How much you think that is? Just
well, we have a combined investment of the TDA of about $30,000, but that's underwritten. And then we have other partners that participate in that locally. So different businesses, real estate people, City of Morganton, Town of Valdez, they all participate in that as well. So that's one of them. The rest of them are much smaller than that, but scattered out throughout the year, where we target Raleigh, where we target Charlotte markets, places that people are going to have to travel enough to spend the night generally, over 50 miles and have things to do that we promote that they're going to take multiple days to do here. So we try to reach those markets. A lot of what we do is not what you consider an ad. It is working with photographers and journalists to come here and visit and then submit those articles and those photographs to publications over time that generates positive publicity for Burke County. So I could get you a list of that.
Yeah, I'm just curious maybe who the top three, who are the top 3 or 5 that we write checks to out of the TDA?
Sure, I can get that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing I'd just like to ask Ed, I get a lot of people ask me about, moving forward as far as hotels and things like that. We've got a lot of places, but we don't have a lot of places with conference rooms. That's, I know a lot of people, like to do little mini conferences, and none of our places have a big enough place where you can, provide a conference room or a place for people to host on a little event and stuff like that, stay at the hotel and that kind of thing.
We have a niche. Our niche here for meetings and conferences is generally about 200 people or less. Depends on their needs. Do they need breakout rooms? Do they just need a large auditorium? You're going to see an announcement here in a few weeks, maybe at the end of March. There's going to be a big meeting coming here in 2027. I'm not going to spoil it, but it is coming. Statewide meetings going to come here in 2027. That will be numerous. It'll be several hundred people that'll stay here and in Hickory and probably McDowell County as well. But we do have a niche, but we don't have the capacity like a Hickory Conference Center or Asheville or those kind of places. And it's a development of which comes first, hotels to house people to come, 500 people at a time to come here, or a conference center that holds 500 people with breakout rooms. Who's going to manage that? It's not profitable for hotels to manage conference centers much anymore. So they don't want to do it. They don't want to build it. There's some more risk associated with that than just building a hotel. So I don't see long-term any big changes in our capacity to hold meetings and conferences here. The Foothills Center, which is fantastic, but is booked. I mean, I talk to Dina all the time, and she's like, yeah, I'm booked that weekend, I'm booked that week, I'm booked that week, which is great. But it's at capacity.
Thank you.
Other question? All right, thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 4 comes from our clerk, appointments to the Opioid Advisory Committee. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to make some appointments, reappointments, and a removal to the Opioid Advisory Committee. Seat number 4, 7, and 10 are effective. Seat number 4 represents educators, seat 7 is employers, and seat 10 is stakeholders with diversity. We need to remove Dr. Welch from seat 4. He is no longer able to serve on this board. We have an application from Ron Angley, a school counselor, to fill that vacancy. And then we need to make an appointment or reappointment to seat 7 and seat 10.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any question on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 5, clerk also, appointments, reappointments to the WPRTA. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to appoint Bradley Kirkley to the Western Piedmont Regional Transportation Authority, seat number 1, to complete the remainder of a 3-year term ending June 30th, 2028, and to appoint Patrick Dickinson to the same board, seat number 2, as the alternate, also to complete a 3-year term ending June 30th, 2028. And this is also in reference to Mr. Glines' upcoming retirement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any question on this item?
What are we doing for Mr. Glines' retirement? Anything?
I'm sure we'll figure that out. All right. Without objection. Without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 6, County Manager, Budget Amendment number 8, $20,000. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several budget amendments to follow. This first one is, as you know, when we administer municipal elections, the municipality that's holding that reimburses us for those expenses. This was the City of Hickory primary that Kenny and the team just administered. A request to budget $20,000 to offset county expense.
All right, any question on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 7, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, as Ms. Sandy just spoke to you all, as you'll recall, in my first year here, we made an agreement with the community college to allocate $425,000 a year into a capital reserve fund to flatten out your capital needs and give us a level of predictability. We will be entering year 4 of this upcoming budget, but this is a request to move $650,000 to the operating fund, and then we'll reimburse the community college for those capital needs that she talked about with panels and so forth, that the chiller replacement, renovations to Foothills Higher Education for dentistry. And obviously it'll be reimbursed at exact cost, but this is the estimate based on their bidding process.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any question on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on consent agenda. Item number 8, Mr. Manager.
This request to budget $2,000 as a donation received from the town of Hildebrand to the East Burke Senior Center, and it'll offset existing supplies.
All right. Any question on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on consent agenda. Mr. Manager.
Next budget amendment for consideration is number 11. This is a grant from the ASPCA to our Animal Services Department. There is no match. The grant is limited to medical needs and will be used to do spay neuter for animals in our care, but offsetting county cost.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any question on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on consent agenda. Mr. Manager.
Budget amendment number 12 is $15,800. It goes to our senior center. It'll expand our meals available to seniors. The grant is from the Gateway Wellness Foundation, and there is no match required with this. It just helps us, again, expand meals to seniors.
All right. Thank you. Any question on this item? How have we come about that grant, Mr. Manager? Do you know?
Ms. Lindsay applied for it. I think it originated with Dogwood Trust, but flowed through Gateway, but being aggressive in what we're going after.
Very good. Okay. Without objection, this item will remain on consent agenda. Item number 11, Mr. Manager.
A project the board is very familiar with, the DOT lane extension over Canal Bridge that connects with parts of the Fauna Flora and over Mountain Victory Trail. As a reminder, the total project cost was $1,550,000. The North Carolina Department of Transportation will manage the project and front $1.2 million. The remaining gap of $350,000 is being absorbed by Friends of Fauna Flora Trail and the Over Mountain Victory Trail nonprofits. And this is a request to budget those donations that will pay for this project.
All right. Thank you. Any question on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on consent agenda. Mr. Manager.
Finally, for consideration, budget amendment number 14. This is our Soil and Water Department, and the North Carolina Office of State Budget Management has allocated an additional $1 million that will be used similar to STRAP that the board is familiar with, that we get annually, but for stream bank remediation associated with Hurricane Helene. When I talk to our staff, most of this will be earmarked for the Linville area from storm damage for erosion and stream bank remediation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Any question on this item?
Is that Linville River where it comes in the lake?
Well, so let me clarify. The original STRAP dollars are being programmed there. This may, and I partially misspoke. This will help offset erosion that we have around our existing water sewer lines. But yes, the Linville River is where the original STRAP dollars were going. That's correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Brings us to item 13, which we have removed, and on to item 14 comes from finance, property surplus sales. And Ms. Margaret will share that with us. Afternoon, Margaret.
Good afternoon. Again, I apologize for the light blue. You see a list, we put the 12 properties that you had approved out to GovDeals, had a lot of interest, a lot of bids going on. They closed out, and you've got the summary there. 9 of the 12 properties met the reserve and are ready to be approved for sale at your next meeting. You have to do that at a regular meeting, and once you approve that, we've received the bid deposits. The only one that is a slight change is the first one on your list, 23-217. The high bidder was not able to meet his commitment. We report that to GovDeals. They note that on his record, and he's actually barred from bidding for, I believe it's 12 months. But the second bidder was willing to do it. It was still above the reserve. So the high bid is now $24.75. So we still have a $375 above the reserve we had set to cover our cost. You'll see the other 3 properties on the bottom part of the list that did not meet the reserve. And so at the meeting, we'll need action telling us what to do. You have to reject those properties' bids and tell us whether you would like us to relist them at the same reserve, relist them with a new reserve. You want to accept the bids as they are with the high, or whatever other action you deem appropriate.
All right. Any question on this item? So, gentlemen, please be prepared at our regular meeting to act on those 3 properties that currently do not meet the reserve. We'll have several options. We can go with the bids, we can reject, or several things. So just be looking at that and be prepared to take action at that time. Thank you, Margaret.
Okay.
Without objection, this item will remain on the agenda. Also, item 15 comes from Finance, Rutherford College Tax Collection Agreement. Ms. Pierce.
Rutherford College reached out requesting that the county take over doing the billing and collections for them, just as we do for many other municipalities. We would charge them a 2% fee, which is similar to what we have in place for all new agreements. Their levy is about $214,000, so you're looking at about $4,200 in revenue, and it will simply add a line to our bills and minimal administrative additional costs, so it's offset by the 2% fee. This is the same agreement we've used with the other municipalities.
Any question on this item?
Yes, one question. What all municipalities are we helping with this?
We collect for, oh my goodness,
Who we do not, it may be a shorter list.
Who we do not, okay.
Morganton.
Morganton, we do not, yeah. Is that it?
Hickory,
Hickory Municipal, we don't, yeah, Longview.
and Longview. I don't think we collect for those
That's
3.
those 3.
It's right here on the
There you go, it's in here.
agenda here. It's,
Psych.
Conley Springs, Drexel, Glen Alpin, Hildebrand, Longview, Road Hiss, and Valdez, Rutherford
Correct.
College now.
Yes. And Rutherford College Board has approved this at their January 12th meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Other question? All right. Thank you, Margaret. Without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. This brings us to item number 6 for decision. First one comes from our county manager's office, update on the opioid abatement team, and Katie Samuels will give us that information. Afternoon, Katie.
Good afternoon. I have here for you today a brief overview and update about our opioid response team and what we've been up to lately. Let me find the clicker here. So this is the overdose trends dashboard. We've had, this was for calendar year 25, January through December. There were 370 EMS calls that came in as suspected overdose. 93 of those calls were verified to be overdoses. And the difference there is that we get a lot of calls coming in for unconscious and a variety of different reasons. And so we've done a really good job of educating folks in the community and our response teams about naloxone and suspected overdoses. So we're getting a lot of that response, which is a really positive thing. And then we can go back, and the verified calls are verified with a healthcare practitioner. So then we can evaluate the trends in overdose and drug utilization in the community. So in 2024, we had 50 overdose deaths, which was a decrease from 60 in 2023. We haven't received the provisional data from 2025 yet, but I'll be able to report that out to you guys as soon as it's released from the state. And then we had 119 ED visits in 2025, which was also down from 2024. So we're seeing positive trends in all of these key areas. The annual overdose trend, you can see there that decrease over time. And then we're also seeing a decrease, and this is from the state website, of foster care entries linked into parental substance use by year. And then what we're really wanting to look at over the next couple of years is that treatment engagement line, where you can see it's a little bit flat right now. We want to see that increase. And some of the strategies that we're doing with peer support and engagement are to increase that number of people that are actually getting into treatment. So you can see from the data that we're doing a good job of preventing fatalities. And now we want to see people get into treatment and have their quality of life improve. And so this is the 25-26 spending overview. So this past fiscal year, we've allocated $2.72 million for different strategies. And we've, as of December, we had spent $458,000 of that, with a remaining amount of $2.26 million. And we have 9 active programs or strategies that are being funded. And so if you look down in the bottom half of that page, that's the total amount, not just the fiscal year 25-26, where you can see some, no, that is the fiscal year. The next page is the total amount over time. So you can see the pay status, and where it says behind, that doesn't mean that the program is behind. It just means that the spending is less than 10% variance with where they are in the contract year. So that means that they're spending less than we anticipated. And what that means is if we have overages at the end of the fiscal year, then that goes back into our special revenue account to be reallocated. And so this is the total settlement overview slide, and it shows our total disbursements over the 18-year period of $25 million. We have received a total of $9.5 million, and we've allocated a total of $3.3 million, leaving an unallocated amount of $6.2 million. And you can see from this slide the strategies that we funded, and then the total amounts over time. And so you can also see the total allocated, the total amount spent, and the remaining amount. So this slide is an example of a tool that our team has built for cash flow projections. The way that opioid settlements are structured is that we get allocations over time instead of one lump sum. So that means as we're looking at spending, we need to monitor our cash flow and keep a minimum reserve as we're allocating funds to different programs. So this is just an example of a tool that we've built. The slider at the top, we can slide it back and forth and set our minimum reserve amount. So if we have a minimum reserve of about 1.75 million based on just a very low continuation spending, then it shows us we can spend about $550,000 in projects that we set priorities for. So we're estimating an amount between $400,000 and $550,000 that we can look at doing the RFP process, doing those grants again, or setting priorities around what specific things that we want to fund or continue to fund. And so our current strategies that have to update you on are Bear Team and Community Navigator, Burke County Recovery Court, High Country Community Health, Spark, and a Caring Alternative. So these slides are pretty text heavy. I included a lot of detail here, so I'll just give you the highlights. Our Bear Team is up and going. We're only one position short of a PM community paramedic, and so we're actively recruiting for that position, but all other positions have been hired for. Our peer support specialist for the night shift start in the next couple of weeks, and we had a community paramedic start last week for the PM position there. So we are on track with going live for 24/7 coverage for our Bear Team. They're actively taking and receiving referrals, And we are really geared up to be 100% online there. So I'd say we're about 95%. So everything is going great there. We're working on a tracking system and case management system so that we can track outcomes for complex cases and start to see some of those high utilizers decrease from the emergency system as we're building this non-emergent system. So this is a dashboard for Burke Recovery Court, and the slides following this, my goal is to get them all looking like this. So this is my example of what our dashboards will be looking like. And this tracks the total active participants they've had. They've had about an average of 22 active participants since July, and they've had a total of 131 participants since the program's creation in 2018. And so you can see also there the gauge where they're at 92% for opioid eligible participants. And this is important as we're looking at, we want to see greater than 50% or 51% of participants with opioid use disorder or polysubstance use disorder for funding. They've had a 50% of participants employed at the time of graduation, 43% reporting sobriety at 6 months, and you can see at the lower part of the page the number of outgoing referrals they've made and the total number of peer contacts and outreach contacts. So here's where we get into the text. I'm sorry the rest of them don't look this pretty. I'm working on it for you guys. So High Country Community Health, their funded program is a low barrier medications for opioid use disorder, or MOUD program. And they are active, and they've served 51 participants with 9 field inductions and 51 outreach participants linked to treatment. And they're working very closely with our BEAR team to get people engaged from that point of crisis into long-term care. So SPARK is the Family Centered Treatment Recovery, or FCTR program, and they are also operational and active. They have 5 total staff, 2 practitioners, a certified peer support specialist, and 100% of the team is trained in trauma-informed care in the FCTR curriculum. They're serving 6 active families with 80 total participant contacts, including 32 family therapy sessions, 25 peer support sessions, 5 random drug screens, with 11 average service hours per family. And they are actively working alongside our providers and DSS for referrals. A caring alternative is managing the SACOT, or SAIOP program, and they are still awaiting licensure, so they're still in the phase of implementation of standing it up, but they've hired their clinicians and they're actively already serving people. So if they receive a referral for this program, their clinician is going ahead and seeing the people and getting them engaged in treatment so that as soon as they get their licensure approved, they're good to go with the program.
Katie, could you just tell us again what SACOT and SAIOP is?
So SACOT is Substance Abuse Comprehensive Outpatient Treatment, and SAIOP is Substance Abuse Intensive Outpatient Treatment. And this is the, if you think about outpatient being on one end of the spectrum and inpatient being on the other, these are right in the middle. So it's an intensive day treatment program where people are coming 5 days or 3 days a week and spending the majority of the day in treatment. So they're in group counseling with each other, working with the providers to do this intensive type treatment. And this treatment also pairs with recovery court. Many of the people in recovery court go through this specific treatment to be able to meet the terms of the program. And that will be held over on 1 Main over here. And they have been really working in the community, building the referral pathways so that when they're live, they're boots on the ground. So the ongoing strategy implementation to continue monitoring and reporting on funded programs. We've made a lot of progress this year in standardizing these reporting. So each one of these programs has a standard reporting tool that they submit to me by the 10th of each month. And then I can build these dashboards and templates to be able to present to you all. So the fiscal year 26-27 planning is underway for what it looks like and how we can line that up with the county's budget process and timeline, and what those different options are based on our cash flow projections and what capacity we have and also what priorities we have. And then we continue to collaborate with our partners and build the provider network so that we can see that treatment utilization rate continue to increase as we see fatalities decrease. And I know that was a lot of information, so I'll be glad to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Katie. Any questions for Katie on this side? All right, seeing here none, this item will remain on the decision agenda. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Just as a matter of clarification, gentlemen, during the consent discussion over the properties, item 14, just make note that all those items that met high bid will remain on the consent agenda, and those other items will be pulled off for decision, okay? We removed item number 2 from decision to begin with, so that brings us to items 3 and 4, tax collection report, tax release refund report. I don't see John today, but these may not be.
John is very ill today, but he will have this data prepared, both collections and release refunds.
Okay.
To prepare.
All right, thank you very much. Without objection, these 2 items will remain on the decision agenda. Just before we get to reports and comments, then, gentlemen, I'm going to ask for about a 15-minute recess, and that will, well, no, take that back. I'm going to skip item 7 for the moment. Come on down. Let's hear the DSS report, and then we'll take a recess and just ask our community development folks to hang with us a few minutes, if you don't mind. And I'm going to ask you to put your speed reading glasses on during that recess and look through that exhibit, and then we'll hear that item. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Corey, the DSS report update.
Thank you for fitting me in before the recess. All right. Just an update on where we are in terms of personnel. When this report was done, we had 15 open positions. That's about a 7.5% vacancy rate. We mentioned last month, we continue to see a little bit of an uptick in economic services vacancies. I think that's due to, I mean, most of you are aware of the impact of HR 1 and what the increased scrutiny and workload in economic services. So I think it's possible we will continue to see a little bit of that. One thing to note in child welfare is you can see the positions going down, but also in the last couple of weeks, we have hired 3 people who previously worked at Burke County and came back. So I think that speaks well of, people thought maybe things might be better somewhere else, but they're coming back. So I think that's a good thing. So in terms of separations, this was for the month of December. So we had 5 total separations and 3 hirings during that time period. And then just jumping into our operations update, as always, I just think it's important to point out that we meet our economic services MOU standards, which, as I mentioned, their job is becoming more difficult with more scrutiny, so continuing to meet those things is a really cool thing. So in terms of Medicaid, our numbers continue to be pretty similar. One thing to note here is during the month of December, we took 560 new applications, which was actually the second most of the year. I think one of the reasons there's lots of information out there about changes in eligibility in both Medicaid and food and nutrition services. So I think that people there is some belief that if they got in before some timeline, they would remain eligible. That's not necessarily true, but I think that's why a lot of counties across the state saw a little bit of an increase in applications taken during the month of December. And then in terms of food and nutrition, the numbers continue to be fairly consistent. Moving on to our social work updates for the month of December, the total number of wards we have, that has gone up a little bit over the last month. You can see in our APS call log data, we had 7 guardianship referrals. Those didn't all result in new wards, but we did increase our wards up to 71, and we still have 16 contracted. I think at the time we contracted the wards, we were at about 80 total. So you can see our total number of wards in the county has gone up over the last little bit. SA in-home cases continue to be fairly stagnant. The one thing I'll point out here, CAP is, again, I think I mentioned before, Community Alternatives Program. It's one of the few money-making programs at DSS, and not every DSS does it. And we currently serve 133, but we have the capacity to serve 188. The state has taken over the referral process, so we can only sort of take referrals as they're sent to us, so we're continuing to work with the state and push them to send us more because we have the capacity to serve more, and we make revenue. There's not a lot of revenue in adult services, so anything we can make from CAP helps fund all the rest of the services. So our staff do a good job, I think, of staying on the state folks, trying to get those slots filled.
Corey, can you just, for everybody's knowledge, tell us what community alternative programs do?
You challenged me. The gist of it is it's a program that exists to try to keep people with needs in their home, in the community, and not having to be in some type of facility. So it basically just provides for some assistance in daily living functions that allows a person who may otherwise need to be in a facility, now they're able to stay in their home. In terms of our CPS reports, typical that you see a little bit of a downshift in December. You know, school is a primary reporter. They're in school less in December, so typically you're going to see a little bit of a reduction in CPS reports. Those are screened in cases, but that's pretty typical. And then in terms of our overall caseloads, I think we've continued to see a little bit of a downshift. We've mentioned before, we did some things with the contract staff and things to help work through a backlog. As of last week, we had 253 open investigation cases and 33 open family in-home cases. So that's a little bit of a downshift, but that's a pretty similar number to where we've stayed throughout the year. In terms of foster care, at the time of this report, we had 192 children experiencing foster care, and then during that same period, we had 6 folks exit foster care, either through some form of permanence or aging out of those entries, and then 4 people exited either through adoption, aging out, or reunification. A couple things I just wanted to bring your attention to that are sort of on the horizon. I talked a few months ago about our move into Path NC in our CPS world. That was a small part of the work we do. So the rest of child welfare will be transitioning into Path NC. I think our entry is supposed to be in August. They have delayed this a little bit, so currently we're scheduled for August. So that'll include all of our CPS in-home cases, foster care adoptions, foster home licensure, and then all of our financials related to like board payments for foster care and stuff like that. So, you know, what we're trying to do now is making sure that you have to have all your information in your current system up to date, and then we'll move into all staff in those program areas have to be trained. So while it was a pretty heavy lift to get CPS ready, it's a much heavier lift to get the rest of child welfare ready, just because they're larger numbers. So those are things we're continuing to work through, and we're hoping actually today we are working with the state to try to get some of that training held at the higher ed center, so that'll help limit the travel for our staff and make it a little easier for us. So hopefully we can get as much of that here as possible to help our staff. And then the other sort of just thing on the horizon, obviously, is the continued implementation of HR 1. There was some new policy that came into effect actually this February 1st in food and nutrition. So there's a lot of work helping set. There's a number of parts of it. They're sort of spread out. The first part was sort of February 1st, so we're continuing to work with our staff to make sure that they're attending all the necessary trainings, making sure that they know new policy. Same with Medicaid. There's significant work increases with work requirements and additional reviews for our Medicaid expansion population. So, you know, I mentioned in the personnel report that we have seen some more increased turnover in our economic services, and I think some of these changes and increased workload and increased scrutiny are playing a role in that. So we're trying to be strategic in how we, just because we've done it a certain way and how things are set up in economic services, me and the assistant director who oversees that actually had a discussion this morning. There's some other ways we can set up our teams to be more efficient. So that's just something to sort of be aware of and have on your radar. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Corey. Any questions on Corey's report?
I do have a question, Corey, on the CAP program. You mentioned that the state sends referrals. Can people in the community not self-refer, or if a family member recognizes maybe there's some issues, could they contact?
The self-referrals, that does happen, but all the referrals then have to go to the state to be assigned to the number of different CAP providers. There's several other CAP providers in the community. We are just one of them, but all the referrals go through the state, and a family is able to sort of choose through freedom of choice who they want the provider to be, but all the referrals are still processed through the state.
And maybe, I don't know if you'll know this, Mr. Manager, our community paramedics and our folks that go out to do lift assist and all the things I hear on the scanner, or do we have a way to maybe assess and communicate back do the folks out in the field know if maybe they would have a potential CAP person that maybe we need to try to get them involved?
I think, is there anything formal? I think that's a good idea that we could, maybe talk in a department head meeting or something about, allow Corey and his team to talk about the types of services and how referrals work. But in my experience, at times those referrals, just come naturally from folks seeing that they need help and so forth. Commissioner Burns actually made a referral from an observation and someone who lives in his community that several folks felt like needed some help and needed some resources. So I think that there is at least a system in place to connect people that just may want to help with resources. But as far as something formal that's more broadly broadcasted about what is available, we like probably a lot of places could do a better job of that.
Yeah,
I will say I do think our paramedics and law enforcement, they do a really good job. You can see when the thing on the adult services talks about the calls. A lot of our calls come from whether it be emergency services or law enforcement. The difference with CAP is because it's a Medicaid billable service. People have to have sort of understand all their options, so they have to be provided sort of all their choices for who provides CAP in the community, and then they have to make a choice of who they want their CAP provider to be. But we do get a lot of just connected to a lot of families through report or calls from our paramedics and law enforcement.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. And kind of along that same line, since it's in my head, I know a friend of mine who was a county commissioner for a number of years. Their community paramedic program kind of worked with Amorum for services too, to kind of try to reduce some of the calls coming into 911 all the time from the same people. So just a thought.
All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, with that, I'll entertain the motion to accept Corey's report.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Those in favor, signify by lifting hand. 5-0. All right, now we'll have a 15-minute recess and give you time to look over this Exhibit A information on the zoning amendment, and then we'll bring Patrick and Alan back to give us the highlights of that, if you don't mind, okay? We'll give you till about 10 till, okay?
Bob, if you want to, your son sits in one of them big, nice chairs. If you want to, your son sits in one of those big, nice chairs. One of those big, fat chairs.
Back to item number 2, under public hearings. And I appreciate that. As I studied this and read over during the snow, I just kept having deja vu. And now I know, I understand why. So I hope you had just a few minutes to look at that. And Patrick had already begun and went through some of that. So Patrick, if we can, maybe just hit a few highlights, or let me just ask any questions in particular that you'd like for Patrick to discuss or at this time. Of course, you'll have time between now and our regular meeting to get questions answered. I'm sure staff will be happy to answer questions. This zoning, of course, gets more into what you can do on your place, and so. Patrick, you want to just hit a highlight or two, anything that you guys have felt might be something we need to give more consideration to?
Mr. Chairman, I would really like to take this document and spend more time with it, and I do have some questions, but I think that would take probably longer tonight to answer them. So I guess what I'm asking, is there a way that we could just reach out to you between now and our regular meeting and let you know if we have a desire to leave it on consent or?
Well, we've got a scheduled public hearing already in place, so I guess we could, at that time, we could kick it down the road, but we'd still need to have the public hearing, would we not, Madam Clerk? Since it's already been advertised and noted, but that certainly doesn't mean we have to act on it. We can move it, delay it if we so desire.
In glancing through it, I didn't see anything that raised a red flag with me. As a matter of fact, I like the fact that we're going to give people more opportunity to use the property they paid for in a way that they want to, but
I think, well, just, of course, Madam Clerk will get it in the package. These are items that folks, I think the public may have some input in, and that they will. I think we just need to get it out there for people to see it, okay? And then that way we'll hear that during the public hearing. That'll give us some more information and as to how we see that going forward, okay? Patrick, Alan, you want to make any other comment at this time?
Was there anything from my kind of brief kind of introduction, and was there anything that y'all wanted any kind of clarification on at first or anything like that? I kind of looking through the ordinance, I have a different perspective on it as a planner than all of y'all, and I wanted to hear your concerns. I'm just kind of glancing off of it. I didn't have anything that kind of came to mind that y'all might want to ask me more questions on, but of course, my door is always open, and I'm always open for any questions.
All right.
I think the only, just at a first glance, this page 3, G, accessory dwellings are to be constructed of like materials, excuse me, and must resemble the primary structure in appearance to the greatest extent possible. Examples of structural compatibility include but are not limited to. I just always think like way out there, because this is a very general, it doesn't go by zoning types, right? So it would apply to RMU or R1 or whatever it is.
Right.
And so I'm just thinking out of the box about, it seems like we're being pretty strict about the appearance of somebody that perhaps lives in maybe it's not a nice neighborhood, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And, trying to help them, but maybe adding some pretty big expense because of the way it looks. And that seems pretty subjective, like, what you think it looks like, their original home, and maybe how they think. So I don't know how I feel about that, honestly.
It's,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was from the previous ordinance that was in there?
I think that's been in there. That's not new language, but
Yeah.
the kind of thing is, it could be color, like, oh, if my house is white, I'm going to paint the outbuilding, the accessory dwelling unit white, so it just kind of blends in together. We're not trying to have we don't tell people what their home should look like. It's just got to meet the building code. But, if they we're just trying to help it fit in so it's not something that feels out of character with that surrounding neighborhood. So it's kind of fitting within that neighborhood fabric on that own property of their house today, what they have.
No, I understand, but what you and I may think fits and what if you have an artistic person that may be living in $1 million house,
Right.
they might say, man, this looks great. whereas you and I might say, gosh, that totally clashes. So I guess just the language, I think, who are we to choose what we think looks good and fits on a particular residence? So just a thought.
I think about it in terms of, we often think about these kind of things in close quarter communities, but maybe I'm on a 10-acre lot and I'm out here in the county, nobody sees my house, nobody sees my, whatever it is I'm going to build. So how can we come to some middle ground?
Can I make just one point of clarification? Contrary to minimum building code, where we're an authority, where we're coming out to inspect in a police presence, if you will, meaning if you don't do X, you don't get a pass. Zoning is, my neighbor called and it's complaint driven. So when you come in to get a zoning permit to do an auxiliary structure, we don't say what color is it. So that would be, in your example, Mr. Chairman, and we can modify the language certainly to resemble that. It could be struck entirely, but it's very different. We're not gonna send a zoning code enforcement out there and say, what color is your building, and is it masonry, and did you put it?
No, but once you've constructed that auxiliary unit, and then a neighbor calls and complains,
Yeah.
and they're gonna say, well, right here it is in the ordinance.
Yeah, and I guess that's not, my point is, how do you enforce that? It's almost, the language is almost suggestive versus authoritative. You're certainly not gonna make someone change the siding of their building after it's already constructed, and it's also not a requirement of the zoning permit. So I guess I'm agreeing that the language is much more, in place to say this is what we think, but it's not enforceable, to your point.
If I'm the neighbor complaining, I'm gonna say, you enforce it, it's on the books, so
Yeah.
maybe it shouldn't even be there, I don't know.
Maybe we shouldn't, yeah.
We could look at adjusting that language to be more of a suggestion rather than a requirement, to look like a requirement. Just say it should be compatible or similar, just because the goal is just fitting in with that site, really.
This really comes from neighborhoods. This is where that's gonna be your pain point. I fully understand where you're coming from too. I got 30 acres, no one's ever gonna see the building. I get that too.
Yeah.
I think that really is coming from, like you said.
Well, maybe not even that it's in the middle of 30 acres. Maybe again, you've got, I just think of an artistic person who's, you see these paintings that are worth millions of dollars, and to you and I'm like, well, what is that? Or maybe you do like those, I'm sorry. But my point is, we're nailing people down to what we think should be, and maybe their desire in their home, whether it's a $20,000 house or a $2 million house.
I think that language it's from the older code or older ordinance. It was to try to get acceptance for this new use coming into properties. Back in 5 or 6, 10 years ago, whenever accessory dwelling units were brought in, they wanted them to allay some of that community concern from neighbors. Their neighbor can build a small unit in the backyard, and it's just to kind of help that blend in. But, it could be, the language could be adjusted a little bit to be more, we encourage that, but doesn't have to, it's not a require or shall.
Yeah, I think I'm with Barry on that. I think it's, if we don't put it some kind of language on it, people will test you. And it'll be a problem right out of the gate, to some degree.
Well,
But this is great. I love this, man. Yeehaw.
All right, well, gentlemen, you got time to look at that before our next meeting. Share your thoughts. If you have some thoughts on items like this, share it with Alan Patrick, and so we can be prepared to have some discussion as need be, and we'll see what the public hearing brings along the way. All right, thank you very much, guys.
Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
This item will remain on the public hearing agenda, and that will bring us over to item 7, reports and comments. Our regular meeting, February 16th, and again, let me just say, appreciate your movement of our meeting today because of the weather. There is, on February 19th, a Chamber's elected officials recognition reception at Comma from 4 to 6. A quorum may be present, so there will certainly be no official business there. February 20th, emergency services headquarters ribbon cutting, 2 o'clock. Keep that in mind. And we'll let the rest of that go for now and have no other items for decision. And with all that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Stroud. All those in favor signify by the uplifted hand. 5-0, Madam Clerk.